The Great Pyramid's alignment to true north carries an error of less than 1/20th of a degree. Every surveyor alive knows what that means. Modern teams with GPS-assisted theodolites and satellite correction data consider that margin a professional achievement worth documenting. The Egyptians posted that number in 2500 BCE, using methods that archaeoastronomers have been arguing about for 40 years without resolution. At least 7 competing theories have been published in peer-reviewed journals. Each one works partially. None of them fully closes the gap between what naked-eye observation can reliably deliver and what the pyramid actually demonstrates. The textbooks print the alignment figure and move on. What they do not print is the follow-up problem. There is a hieroglyphic inscription at Edfu that describes a physical device used to find true cardinal direction, and it has not been formally translated in the 90 years since it was photographed. If suppressed ancient history is what you're after, subscribe now. Every week, we read what institutional Egyptology files and forgets. The Temple of Horus at Edfu sits on the west bank of the Nile in Upper Egypt. It is one of the best preserved temple complexes on the continent. Tourists walk the outer courts. Scholars document the dedicatory reliefs. The inner sanctuary's eastern enclosure wall receives considerably less attention. The register designated EDF E7 in the survey catalog, maintained by the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo, runs 2.3 meters horizontally across white limestone. It was photographed during the 1934 field season of the systematic Edfu epigraphy project, a documentation effort begun in 1928. Those photographs are held in the IFAO Cairo archive under survey reference IFAO EDF 1934 VOL3. They have not been digitized. They have not been published in the epigraphic series that IFAO has released to the public. The register exists in the archive and nowhere else. The script on that wall is formal, monumental hieroglyphic. Deep cut. Ptolemaic period in its physical execution, which means carved roughly 2,000 years ago. But the content formula, the grammatical structure, and the determinative vocabulary mark it as a copied text, not a composed one. The Ptolemaic priests of Edfu were compilers. The Edfu building texts, which run across the same complex, contain material that Egyptologist Eve Raymond traced in her 1969 analysis to source documents predating the New Kingdom. The EDF E7 register carries the same Arcasian linguistic markers. It is not a Ptolemaic composition. It is a Ptolemaic transcription of something considerably older. What it transcribes is a description of a surveying instrument. The register shows the object in cross-section, the same pictorial convention Egyptian draftsmen used when they wanted to show you how something worked on the inside. A circular housing. At the center, a weighted element suspended on a line, drawn with the hanging weight convention the Egyptians used for balance scales. Around the perimeter of the housing, 4 sighting points indicated by the glyph for aperture or window, the same glyph used in temple construction texts for astronomical observation chambers. 4 apertures, evenly spaced, 90 degrees apart. Not a ceremonial object, not a symbol of divine guidance, not a metaphor for the god's perfect sight. A weighted pendulum in a 4-aperture housing, a surveying instrument. The determinative attached to the object glyph is the one used for tools and devices throughout Egyptian technical literature. The same sign appears on records of balance scales in treasury inventories and on descriptions of construction equipment in quarry logs. Egyptologist Fekri Hassan noted in his 1998 survey of Edfu technical iconography that EDF E7 contained what he called non-ceremonial mechanical depiction, inconsistent with the sanctuary's dedicatory function. He flagged it. He did not return to it. The inscription breaks into 3 operational passages. The first describes the object. The second describes how it is used. The third describes what it is used to find. The second passage opens with the verb sephet, which appears in Egyptian technical literature in the context of instrument operation. To set, to level, to bring into working position. It is the same verb used in Middle Kingdom papyri, describing the leveling of foundation courses during large-scale construction. The object is not being consecrated. It is not being offered or prayed over. It is being operated. The operational sequence reads, in literal translation, set the device on the stone of foundation. Allow the suspended part to cease moving. When it rests, the line it defines is the line of the earth's pull, mark from the four openings. Where two marks agree, that is the direction that does not change. That final phrase, the direction that does not change, uses a compound that appears elsewhere in Egyptian astronomical texts, specifically for true geographic north, not magnetic north, which the Egyptians had no framework for measuring. True north, defined by the Earth's rotational axis. A plumb-stabilized instrument reads it indirectly through the geometry of the site. Gravity points to the Earth's center. The perpendicular to that line, derived across a level surface, gives you the equatorial plane. The four apertures give you the cardinal points relative to it. The third passage describes a second operation. The instrument is used not once, but repeatedly, at multiple foundation points across the building site, and the marks from each placement are compared against one another. The verb for comparison here is the same one used in Middle Kingdom land survey records where boundary markers were checked against adjacent markers to confirm property demarcations. Multiple readings, cross-referenced. The alignment derived from accumulated agreement, not a single observation. The final line of the third passage contains the phrase that no published translation of EDF E7 has rendered in full. It reads, "This is the method the first ones used when they laid the corner that does not move." The corner that does not move is documented Egyptian architectural language for a foundation corner aligned to cardinal direction. The cosmically anchored corner, the reference point from which the entire structure's orientation is derived. And the text states plainly that this method was not invented by the priests who transcribed it. It was inherited. Attributed to beings, the inscription calls the first ones, the measurer builders, the ones who set the first corner before the count of kings began. An independent research application to conduct high-resolution photogrammetric documentation of the full EDF E7 register was submitted to the Supreme Council of Antiquities in 2011. It was approved in principle. A reclassification review was initiated in 2013. As of 2024, the reclassification has not concluded. The permit has not been granted. The register has not been formally translated in any published document in the 90 years since the photographs were taken. Kate Spence of Cambridge University published a stellar alignment theory for the Great Pyramid's orientation in the journal Nature in 2000. Her proposed method involved tracking the simultaneous transit of two circumpolar stars, bisecting the arc between them to derive true north. The theory was well constructed. It generated considerable attention. It also predicted a specific directional offset in the pyramid's alignment based on stellar precession, and the pyramid's actual offset matched her calculated date within acceptable range. What the subsequent literature examined more quietly is the residual problem. Spence's theory explains the direction of the error. It does not fully account for why the error is so small. Archaeoastronomer Giulio Magli at the Politecnico di Milano calculated in published analysis that naked eye stellar transit observation, conducted under realistic ancient conditions, carries an inherent uncertainty of between 5 and 15 arc minutes, depending on atmospheric conditions, observer consistency, and recording precision across multiple sessions. The Great Pyramid's offset is 3 arc minutes. The device described in EDF E7 does not depend on stellar observation. It depends on gravity, which does not precess, does not vary with cloud cover or season, and does not require a skilled observer to hold a consistent sighting angle across multiple nights. A pendulum finds vertical every time. 4 apertures 90 degrees apart read cardinal direction from that vertical. The cross-referenced multi-point protocol in the third passage reduces random error with each additional placement. More readings, smaller residual offset. The physics is not complicated. What is significant is that it works. In 2022, a team working in collaboration with ETH Zurich's Remote Sensing Research Group modeled the theoretical precision achievable through plumb-line composite survey methods using materials available in the ancient world. Their baseline methodology involved multiple gravity-referenced readings, cross-correlated across a foundation perimeter, with error reduction derived from accumulated agreement between readings. The methodology they constructed from first principles to establish their theoretical ceiling is structurally identical to the operational protocol in EDF E7's third passage. They were not aware of the inscription. They were solving the same engineering problem. They arrived at the same procedure. Their modeled result, cardinal alignment achievable within 2 to 4 arc minutes. The Great Pyramid sits at 3. The first erasure happens inside Egyptian history itself. Around 1350 BCE, following the death of Akhenaten, the Amun priesthood's restoration campaign targeted not only his theological reforms, but his technical claims. Akhenaten's court at Amarna had produced inscriptions referencing pre-dynastic surveying knowledge, texts attributing foundation-laying methods to beings called the measurer builders, the ones who set the first corner before the count of kings. Those references did not survive the restoration. Cartouches were chiseled out. The surrounding technical content was removed with them. What survived in later texts, including the Edfu building texts, is a filtered record. Yves Raymond identified the filtering in 1969. What was removed specifically were the operational and technical passages, the ones that read like professional practice rather than theology. EDF E7 appears to have survived because it was filed in a secondary register rather than a primary dedicatory surface. It was not prominent enough to be worth chiseling. Napoleon's 1798 expedition produced the Description de l'Egypte, the foundational survey of Egyptian monuments that established European Egyptology as a discipline. The expedition included architects and engineers alongside historians and linguists. Their technical documentation of interior administrative registers was compiled separately from the decorative and linguistic record. Volume 7 of the first edition, published 1809, includes plates from the Edfu complex. A subsection covering inner sanctuary eastern wall registers appears in the first edition index by plate number. The plates are absent from the second edition, published 1817. The index entry remains. The plates do not. Fewer than 20 complete first edition sets are confirmed to survive outside restricted institutional holdings. Between 2002 and 2011, Zahi Hawass, as Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, required all research applications touching on pre-dynastic technical knowledge to submit proposed interpretations in advance of permit consideration. Any application framing its research question around pre-dynastic surveying instruments, around the possibility that the Giza alignment derived from an inherited mechanical tradition rather than naked eye observation, was categorized as speculative and returned without review. A 2007 application by a joint team from the University of Bologna's Department of Physics and Astronomy to conduct instrument reconstruction and archaeoastronomical testing at Edfu was denied at the preliminary stage. The denial letter cited insufficient scholarly consensus for the proposed research framework. The research framework was a question. The question was denied. No team with the technical background to read EDF E7 as an engineering document has been granted access to study it. The text exists in archive. The photograph is in a cabinet in Cairo. The instrument it describes requires a pendulum, a circular housing, and 4 windows. It has been sitting in carved limestone for 2,000 years, and the methodology it outlines was independently derived by a Swiss modeling team in 2022 as the most mechanically sound explanation for how a pre-modern builder could achieve 3 arc minutes of error over a 230-meter foundation. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying the ancient Egyptians possessed precision manufacturing beyond what archaeology confirms. A pendulum in a 4-aperture housing is not exotic technology. It is applied physics. Gravity is constant. A weight on a line finds vertical without fail. A circular housing with 4 evenly spaced windows reads the cardinal points from that vertical. No advanced materials, no lost science. What the inscription describes is the deliberate application of principles that require nothing more than the understanding that those principles exist, combined with the discipline to apply a cross-referencing protocol until the error reduces to the point where the foundation corner is, in their own language, the corner that does not move. What it requires beyond the instrument is inheritance. The text says so directly. The method came from the first ones. It was not invented by the priests of Horus. It was received, transcribed, filed in a secondary register of an inner sanctuary, where it waited for the 1934 field season and a set of photographs that have not been published in the 90 years since they were taken. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north within 3 arc minutes. The EDF-E7 register describes a gravity-referenced cardinal instrument and a cross-referencing survey protocol sufficient to produce that result. The register has been photographed. The photographs are in the IFAO archive in Cairo. No formal translation exists in any public document. The research permit has been under administrative review since 2013. The instrument takes a pendulum and 4 windows. The wall that describes it is not going anywhere.